රටේ හෙට දවස වෙනුවෙන් සතියේ සෑම දිනකම උදෑසන 9 සිට
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Zoom. Newsfirst is doing these interviews using Zoom because, of course, of the spread of the dreaded CV-19 pandemic and, sadly, the increased number of those deceased. And we are all doing our best to try and stem the spread of this dreaded disease. Now, this evening, we've got with us here, using Zoom, of course, Dr. Jehan Pereira, who is, of course, the Executive Director of the National Peace Council. Very good evening to you, Dr. Pereira.
Good evening, Faraz.
Thank you very much for coming on the program. And it's sort of that time of the year, isn't it, when the Dr. Jehan Pereiras appear on national television and are quizzed about all sorts of things, but it's almost always has a common denominator, which is the UN. So now, what is the latest? Can you bring us up to speed? There's a UN session happening. We've had a new foreign minister installed. And what's the latest? Tell us, Dr. Pereira.
Well, I think now what Sri Lanka has to do is to deal with a fallout of what has happened, which is the UN High Commissioner has made her statement on Sri Lanka, and thereafter Sri Lanka has made its response, and the international community has also made their responses. They have also said various things, and now it's up to us to follow on what has been discussed there. And I think on this occasion, unlike in the previous occasion, Sri Lanka actually is going to cooperate. And I think that is why we have a new foreign minister, Professor Pires, who understands the interactions between countries, the need to fulfill certain international obligations that Sri Lanka once took on and which the international community is expecting us to fulfill. Of course, he is negotiating hard. I mean, that is why he has rejected one of the main things that the UN High Commissioner has put forward, which was decided at the previous UN Human Rights Council session, which is the establishment of a monitoring mechanism to monitor Sri Lanka and to investigate Sri Lanka. It is going to be a UN mechanism. He has said, no, we do not want to accept that. But with regard to the other issues, I think Sri Lanka is going to try and find a way to deal with those issues instead of rejecting them.
So, so much so for the rejection of that UN Charter by Foreign Minister former Dinesh Gunawardena then.
Yes, I think that rejection took place at a different time. It was a time when the elections had just taken place. The government had been elected with a very strong majority. The economy was doing well, reasonably well. There was a lot of confidence. The government had a lot of confidence in its ability to address the economic challenges as well as to face the international community.
So
then what happened?
Yeah.
The COVID came and dealt a big blow. And also then the economy went into a tailspin, which it is still in. And the government's position has, instead of being able to try and dictate terms to the rest of the world, now the government knows it has to cooperate with the rest of the world. I think that's the major difference. Dinesh Gunawardena made his statement at a time when the government was confident and thought that it could reject what the previous government had agreed with the international community. And he thought that by rejecting it, and I think that was wrong, even at that time it was wrong thinking, they thought that by rejecting the resolution that the previous government had co-sponsored, that all the obligations would now no longer need to be fulfilled by the Sri Lankan government. But that was not the stance of the international community. They said, just because you have rejected it, that doesn't mean we will not call upon you to do it. Now, the government also, in the meantime, has got considerably, it's in a weaker situation than a year ago, especially economically, and now wants to cooperate. I think it wants to cooperate with the international community to the extent possible while keeping its core interests in mind.
I don't want to sound the party pooper here, but in your mind, do you think that this government is just, leading the maiden up the garden path sort of thing, because the elections are so far away, 3 years away? So, maybe, do they feel that they can just pull the wool over the collective international eye? Or are they really, do you detect a real commitment to resolve this long-standing issue?
There are, of course, governments were in a stumbling block for previous governments. Previous governments did not have that two-thirds majority, as in recent times. And secondly, they also had the problem that they were not exactly very well trusted by the people, some of the government leaders at that time. So this government has these two advantages. So potentially it is in a position to address the most controversial issues, the difficult issues relating to national security, national sovereignty, national unity. This government is in the position. Of course, it comes with a very heavy baggage. The heavy baggage is their past track record. The campaign that they had at the election, which was very much oriented towards the Sinhala majority's point of view and did not encompass that of the ethnic and religious minorities in the past at the election and even their previous track record. So now they have to make a turn with that. They have to make a break with that past. And the question is whether they can make the break with the past. We should support them if they wish to make a break with the past. However, there's very appalling evidence to the contrary. Like, for instance, the recent the act of absolute lawlessness of the Minister of Prison Reform, what he has done, taking a gun, going into prisons, and not being really held to account, because while he has resigned from his single ministerial position, he retains the other ministerial position, and the government leadership, as far as I know, so far, has not chided him or publicly chided him or taken the action that would be taken to if any other person had done similar action. So that these are all the baggage of the past, which we want to see a change, and but we are not seeing it. But we are seeing with words. With words, there is a difference. There is indeed a difference with words. And Professor Pires is leading that charge.
But it's all only words, isn't it? With apologies to Boyzone. But it's just words. Every year at this sort of time, whenever the UN sessions are on or something like that, then Sri Lanka's foreign ministry goes overboard, and they're all running around. They're all running around. I don't want to describe how they're running around, but they are running around. And nothing ever seems to get resolved. On the one side, the Sri Lankan government, as well as the International Red Cross, in some reports, say that the number of people unaccounted was less than 10,000. One says about 7,000, another says some figure less than that, but anyway, it's less than 10,000. We have somebody who wrote a book, and it's now become part of the narrative that over 40,000 died. Now, none of these seems to be getting making any benefit for those finally left on the ground in the former conflict areas in terms of lands and other rights and so on. So when are we going to cut to the chase, stop all this talk and get going? I noticed what you said just now about the state minister, but I also put it to you, there are people who have been arrested for almost no earthly reason. Let's take the case of Hijaz Hizbullah. He's been now he's been charged, but he's been there. His rights as an attorney at law appear to have just been dismissed or thrown out of the window, and so on. There are others. We've had the the Sergeant Ratnayaka, who was given a presidential pardon, notwithstanding the fact that he was convicted by every single court. We have the former Navy commander who is still making his monthly appearances to court for no God knows what earthly reason. Others have left the country. The complainant have left the country. The person whose investigation has left the country. And so Sri Lanka, even though you say that the people will trust this government in terms of security, I put it to you that in fact the security of law in Sri Lanka has all but eroded.
What you say, yes, I mean, you have made a very good case. You have pointed out what you said is all factual. But then, I know, but we have to at least see what openings there are, what nuances there are. Now, with regard to the words of the government, in the last several rounds at the UN, the government's words were tough as they are now, but also did not leave space. They said, I mean, they didn't say that they were going to do anything. I mean, that was very substantial. What they said last time was that they will appoint a commission to investigate other commissions and see what has been left undone. Very vague things. But on this occasion, I see that the government actually presented a report to the UN on which I think had some 22 points in it, a 13-page document where they tracked what they had done. And actually they have done most of those things. It is factual. Like, for instance, things have improved. I mean, not like they should, but they have improved. For instance, the return of land to people. I think like 90% of land has been returned to people. There is still some land that remains to be returned, and that's the problem, but land has been returned. And in a way, so there are positive things that have happened, and the government has invested in the North. So there are some positive things that are also taking place. But overall, I think the situation is bleak. There needs to be a firm decision on the part of the government to chart a new path, which at least they are saying with words. At least they have written now a report, a good report. Professor Peiris is there. Professor Peiris, being the foreign minister, is important because he is capable of comprehending that what needs to be done. I mean, he is a man who, at one time, 25 years ago, we all admired him very much for presenting a political solution to the long, protracted ethnic conflict, the devolution package, which he did cooperatively with the leaders of the Tamil National Alliance, the TULF at that time. So that knowledge is there in him. And we must hope that he actually is going to not only be a spokesperson, but actually represents a true intention on the part of the government.
So 25 years ago, Professor G.L. Peiris was a star. Shall I put it to you that he is now living on reflected glory?
He still retains his intellect, his knowledge, and he is a civil person. He is a very civilized person.
Well, I'm sure.
Governments had different. The government took a different stand, especially during the war. But now the government leadership itself is saying that they are going to take a new path. And I think there is some evidence that at least at the level of thinking and that there is some changes taking place.
But Dr. Pereira, when are we going to stop this talk and let's get on with the real life? The real life means jobs for these people who have been affected by the war, homes for them. There are still people who were booted out of Mannar. Let's not forget them, shall we? They are essentially internally displaced. There still are people who are still 30 plus years after being booted out by the LTT, they're still displaced. Not many people are talking about that lot, right? They're all, this lot and that lot, we're all one, where this is people of one Sri Lanka. So why can't we cut to the chase and say, look, let's get on with the reparations, let's get on with as much of the land possible, and there's no way that they will be getting all the land back because, you know, we have military installations, and if we are to maintain the peace, as they say, then apparently they need it. So that's fine. Let them pay reparations. You know, they seem to have enough money under this new monetary MMT, right? Modern monetary theory. They can print enough of money. So why can't they print money, pay these people and tell them to get on with it? And basically, we will have to have something of a public apology. I believe President Kumaratunga was not averse to apologizing. So why can't the current lot be encouraged to make the apologies, and so in order to get on with life? Or I fear, Dr. Pereira, that in your lifetime and in mine, and probably in the lifetime of our producer Shahan Ranatunga, nothing is going to be resolved. And do you want your children to also start reading and listening to News First about all these dreadful things that nobody's getting done?
I mean, I agree with you that reparations need to be done, should be done. I think the government is ready to do that. Of course, the quantum of reparation that they are thinking of is quite small in relation to other things, like, for instance, the sugar scam or the central bank scam. Much more money has been lost than what is going to be devoted to reparations. I think we need to make a real commitment to reparations, to trying our best to repair the lives of those people who lost their loved ones and who lost their properties and all. That is one part. But other part is also, I think very much that the Tamil people, and especially the victims, want more than a public common apology. Of course, that is also important. A common apology, a public apology to everyone, as recommended by the LLRC, is necessary. But I think it has to go beyond that, because the victims are all individual families. I think there has to be some other thing also. We need to make individual apologies, some link with the individual has to be made. Now, I know that dealing with the past and finding actually what happened to them is going to be very difficult. A lot of evidence has been lost in the course of the past several years. The government leadership and the military and all the involved in the war don't really want to go into that, because terrible things happen in wars. We all know that. And it is unfortunate that that what happened during the war and the impunity that was there during the time of the war, in a way that mindset is still continuing. I mean, I think the state minister's actions are reflective of a certain culture of impunity that comes from the war times, when maybe in war times, as I said, terrible things happen. But we have to sit collectively and find answers to that. I know those are difficult problems. Even in the UK at this time, there is the UN Human Rights Council, the commissioner, has also criticized the UK for not dealing properly with its Northern Ireland issue. Even in Northern Ireland, there were killings on a much smaller scale. And there was, again, the soldiers were involved, but the government wants to protect them because the government feels that those soldiers...
But, you know, Dr. Jampera, just ahead of a break of which we are overdue, I just want to say that even in Britain, they are either they've passed it or they're in the throes of passing it, a law that will protect their armed forces from prosecution when they're taking part in the international theater of any war. So if they can do it, why little Sri Lanka can't do it? Is it because why? Because we've only got tea and we don't have oil. Is that it?
So I think we should also look at what's happening in the international community and take action accordingly. We should look at the international. There are a lot of lessons to learn from them about what to do, what not to do. But I think that in our case, things happen on a larger scale. It happened with our own citizens. So sometimes foreign models may not exactly work, but certain principles can be taken up. maybe a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which tries to ascertain the truth, maybe not the individual culpability of this particular soldier, that maybe that will not be possible. It's very difficult. I know those are difficult things, but anyway, we need to wrestle with that. And if the government does show that it is wrestling with that, I think it will evoke a positive response from the Tamil community.
And now let's go and take a short break in which we shall look at the headlines of this evening's primetime news. We will, of course, be posing questions to Dr. Jehan Pereira on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
Establishing an external mechanism to resolve Sri Lanka's conflicts is unnecessary, says the Foreign Secretary. Was the former Attorney General's revelation on the April 21st attacks concealed? EU delegation to visit Sri Lanka for talks on GSP+. Farmers express dissent over unacceptable behavior of officials. Was the son who murdered his father responsible for his uncle's death? Probe commenced into the mystery.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. I'm in conversation with Dr. Jehan Pereira, the Executive Director of the National Peace Council. Now then, Dr. Pereira, I've been dying to ask this question for a while now, so I'll get it out and dusted with, shall I? Do you believe firmly that the government of Sri Lanka, at the time this war was being concluded, in short, when President Rajapaksa the first became the president, do you believe that Sri Lanka had a policy to get rid of our Tamil population?
I mean, certainly not. I don't think that is correct at all. Because during the time of the war, the Tamil population lived with us in Colombo. I mean, there were riots. I know that there were riots. But by and large, they lived with us peacefully, and they had their rights. And even in the middle of terrible acts against but
but
the Temple of the Truth, there were no riots, there was no violence. So
now we know how treacherously bad the LTT were. We can't forget the attacks in Anuradhapura and the central bank attacks and so many dreadful things. But, are you saying that you would not subscribe to this whole notion that there was some form of genocide going on?
Notion of genocide has been brought up repeatedly by...
Yes, but do you as in your role as the Executive Director of the National Peace Council, and you've represented Sri Lanka at Geneva and so on, at the invitation of the late Mangala Samaravira, but do you believe that would you agree that there was a form of genocide, or you would dismiss that out of the way?
I would dismiss it for this reason. I know that large number of Tamil people died, large number of civilians died. They had no connection with the war, but they were caught up in crossfire. They were wrong targets, especially in the last battles when there was actually the fog of war, and then large numbers of people came towards the army lines. Probably, I mean, they came running to escape even. And it is possible that large numbers were killed in those last, because along with them, there was LTT also. But the definition of genocide is an intent to wipe out an entire race, an entire ethnic community. And there was no such intention. If at all, there may have been an intention of their small groups of people in an area. All of them were killed. Maybe that may have happened, But that is not genocide. Genocide is the entire population. The intent, the desire to eliminate, the intent to eliminate an entire population. I don't think there is any evidence of that. And I don't believe that is correct.
Dr. Pereira, no,
there was no genocide.
I just wanted to clear that. I wanted to clear that air. Now then, Dr. Jehan Pereira, tell me this. Why can't we get on? Why can't we divert monies from these portable gyms, 593 of them at about 10 million apiece? Why can't we take that money? Why can't we take all sorts of other money? This 1% tax amnesty to a bunch of rogues who have evaded their taxes, corporates and individuals probably, you know, and now they're getting away with it with 1%, 1%, right? Why can't we spend this money and get rid of these underlying problems like the housing, not only for the war affected in the former conflict areas, but for the people affected by the tsunami? What about the estate workers who, for heaven's sake, have came in here and they're still 2-3 generations living in a 12 by 15 room? 3 generations in one room. Think of the social problems. Why can't we all get together and do this instead of battling with the government on this and that and the 40,000 unaccounted for? That 40,000 has never been proven anyway. Why can't we get on? That's the question.
Because our leaders, we have not had a leadership which is what we call statesman-like, which is selfless, which can not only must be good people inside, but they also have to be very bright and very tough. That combination is not to be found.
Bright and tough. They robbed the central bank. Bright and tough. They've gone into prisons, brandishing weapons. Bright and tough. You know what on earth is going on? They're
selfless, bright and tough.
Yes, well, they're not, are they? They're not, are they?
We have not had it. And unfortunately, maybe our political system doesn't permit it, because the political system is one where you have to get the people to vote for you. And to get the people to vote for you, you need to have your supporters who will go and get the vote.
And I want... I had a question here from a member of the public who wanted to know, why is it that nobody ever poses the question as to the TNA's support for the LTTE? You know, they didn't, no one's asking them that question. It eventually led to Elam War 4, didn't it?
I know the TNA people, they had no choice. It was at the point of the gun that they had to agree that the LTT was the sole representative. Their top leaders, all of them were killed. Neelan Tiruchelvam, who was very close to me, I mean, he was like a mentor at a time. He was killed by the LTT. Sambandhan, who was next to him, his friend, good friend Sambandhan, he lived in terror after that, because Sambandhan and Neelan were so close. Sambandhan was the next person. So it is out of fear that they agreed that the LTT will be the sole representative. On the other hand, there was this that they held in common with the LTT, and that was they wanted rights for the Tamil people. They wanted the Tamil people to be treated justly. And on that, the LTT actually had support from a lot of Tamils, because they were fighting for that. They were fighting in a bit cruel, unacceptable way, but they were fighting for the rights of the Tamil people. The TNA, on the other hand, stood for the same rights of the Tamil people. And in this case, they were frightened. They had to, if they didn't agree that the LTT is the sole rep, they would be executed.
Can I pose you a hypothetical question? The Sirisena Wickremesinghe government didn't have a 2/3 majority. Therefore, perhaps they couldn't do as much in terms of reconciliation, accountability, and all those sort of things. But this government, and this is the double-edged sword of having a 2/3 majority. This government has a 2/3 majority, just as much as the popularity of Mahinda Rajapaksa soared after the end of the war. Aren't these missed opportunities for Sri Lanka? Because they have the 2/3 majority, they can do what they want. They can move me 10 feet to the left if they want to, if they put their minds to it, okay? But Why can't they use the power that evolves and devolves from this 2/3 majority to sort these pressing issues that won't go away, like the accountability issue?
Faraz, I mean, that is why I think we should support and urge our government leaders to make that change. Now, I like to share this with you, that some of my colleagues had the opportunity to meet the president, and they thought that there was a change in him. Now, at least he listened to them. He took notes while they spoke. They spoke things which we normally cannot speak to government leaders. I myself have attended other meetings with government ministers recently after the GSP Plus issue and all blew up, and in just before the UN Human Rights Council. So people can be also cynical about it. But I also was part of some of the meetings, and I spoke to them like I speak to you now. And there was no comeback. They were not, I mean, there was no angry comeback. At least, of course, they didn't also give us great answers, but they listened to us. This is a change. These are people to whom we were shut out of having that type of communication with them. Now we receive that opportunity. It may be that it's only for the purpose of Geneva, the international community, but at least we got it. And now we are hoping that we can build on that. It's a far hope, but we must hope. I know, because that's the only way in which things can change in this country.
Well, where there's hope, there must be eternal hope, I hope. But Dr. Jehan Pereira, thank you very much for being on Newsline Zoom. We much